Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Now in today's video we're going to be discussing investing and specifically things that you might consider having in place or doing before you start on your investing journey. Now the nature of the things that I'll share with you today mean that they're not the most exciting things to talk about, but I do believe that if they're implemented correctly then they can really help you build a strong base for your investing journey to come in the coming years and decades ahead. As always guys, please remember that I'm not a financial advisor, so please do your own due diligence and research before you make any financial decisions, and also please speak to a professional if you are seeking advice. Okay, so a big one is going to be credit card and overdraft debt. Now, to be completely honest, if you have credit card or overdraft debt, you shouldn't be going anywhere near investments. You should really, in my opinion, be focusing your efforts on paying off this debt first. Now, on a side note, I would always recommend that you stay out of your overdraft and that, if at all possible, you pay off your credit card balance in full at the end of each month. One of the main benefits or the reasons why it's so important to pay off your credit card or overdraft debt in full each month is because the interest that is applied to these two types of debt in particular tends to be very high. You know, it's not unheard of to have a credit card where any debt that you build up is charged at 40% interest, which is very, very high. So let's take an example. Let's say that you had £2,000 worth of credit card debt and you were being charged 25% on that debt in interest per year, which is pretty typical. If you're able to pay off that £2,000 debt in full, that is 25% in interest that you're no longer having to pay. So when you think about it, that's really a 25% return that you've made on your money. And that's the way I like to think about it when comparing it to investments, which is what we're doing. And that's really the main reason why it's so beneficial to pay off these debts before you start investing, because if you are investing, you can't reasonably think that you're going to get an annual return of more than 25%. It can be done, but the average is 8 to 10%. So obviously, you know, 8 to 10% average return for investments is obviously a lot lower than the interest on the credit card debt in the example that I used earlier of 25%. So you can see how if you put your money towards the credit card or overdraft debt first, that is a more impactful way of putting your money towards something. You know, it's going to be more impactful and better in the long term to pay off that credit card debt first before you consider the investments, purely because the interest on the credit card debt that you're accruing is considerably higher than the return that you might expect on average from your investments. Now, another benefit to paying off your credit card and overdraft debt in full before you start investing is the psychological benefits. I think, you know, if you pay off all your debt, you kind of have a clean slate, and that clean slate allows you to build a solid base upwards before you start your investment journey. And I think it also allows you to build sort of good habits and get those good habits cemented in place before you start investments. And I think that will allow you to, that will ensure that you know, don't make poor financial decisions, and that the financial decisions that you do make will positively impact your financial security for the years and decades ahead as you grow older. Now, one of the other things that I would recommend or suggest doing before you start investing is to have what I call an emergency fund in place. Now for me, this is roughly, give or take, £1,000, but really I can't tell you how much it should be. It's going to depend on sort of your comfort level and also your individual circumstances and your family circumstances. So an emergency fund is exactly that. It's only to be used in emergencies. So what do I mean by an emergency? Well, things like, you know, urgent car repairs or things like that would definitely be classed as an emergency, but obviously, you know, Christmas presents or birthday presents, they do not fall under the category of an emergency. Please, you know, this emergency fund should really be untouched unless it really is urgent to access those funds. And speaking to that, I would ideally have this emergency fund in a, maybe an online easy access savings account, somewhere where I can easily transfer the money into my current account that will allow me to spend it on short notice on my debit card. The next thing that I would suggest you have implemented before you start investing is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Now, like the emergency fund, this is going to vary from individual and depend on your individual circumstances and family circumstances. So it's not really something that I can tell you how much it should be. But what I would say you could possibly implement and do is print out your bank statements from the past few months. And this is something that I found particularly useful. So when you're going through your bank statements, really go through in detail, the exact expenditures and costs that you had for that month. And really the key things that you're looking at are your mortgage or rent payments, your food bills and your utility bills. And by going through these and making a total, it will allow you to more accurately define how much your 3 to 6 months of living expenses should be. And one thing to say is that this 3 to 6 months of living expenses, that sum of money can go in the same easy access savings account as the emergency fund. And this will really just allow you to have, these savings in one place, and it'll really just make it easier to manage for you guys. One thing to note is that in the current climate in 2021, the interest rates on savings accounts are pretty crappy. I think the best that you're going to get out there is maybe 0.4, 0.5%, but don't worry about that, guys. The purpose of the emergency fund and the 3 to 6 months of living expenses is purely there for your security. This is not money that you need to maximize your returns on. It's not money that you should be worrying about putting into investments. It's just purely there for your investment. For your security rather. So please don't get the urge to just dip into this and put some in investments because you think it's a large amount of money to just have sitting around, because you never really know what's going to happen. So it's really just there as a security fund, really to just have for that rainy day that might come along in the future. And it brings me on to really the primary reason why you need a 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved up, and it's really in case if you have the unfortunate circumstance of losing your job. If that is the case and that is something that happens in that interim period when you're looking for a new job, this amount of money saved up will allow you to continue paying your monthly payments, such as the rent or the food or utility bills, without taking out additional debt. And as I mentioned, debt, particularly certain types of debt, is something that we want to try and stay out of if at all possible. And this really, by saving this amount of money beforehand, gives you the best chance of doing that, in my opinion. The next thing, guys, is the importance of picking the right brokerage before you start investing. Nowadays, there's a huge number of online brokerage available out there to all of us, and they all offer different things. So I would really recommend that you do your own due diligence and research before making a final decision. It can be really easy to kind of, want to dive straight into the investments and not really think about the brokerage account that you're going with, but I would really recommend that you do your research. And obviously, nowadays with YouTube and the internet, there's so much free information out there to help you make an informed decision. So I'd really try and make the most of that, those resources that are available to you. And one thing to consider as well is that, some brokerage accounts will vary in the financial instruments and assets that you're able to invest in. So say, for example, one brokerage account may only allow you to invest in stocks and funds and exchange traded funds or ETFs, whereas another brokerage account may also allow you to invest in bonds and cryptocurrencies or other currencies such as the US dollar or the pound. So that's something that you need to consider, and you need to think about what makes most sense for you in your individual circumstances as well. But as there are so many investment and brokerage accounts out there, if it's something that you guys would be interested in, I could do a video where I review some of the most popular brokerage accounts in the UK and do a breakdown of some of the pros and cons that I personally think they hold. Okay, so the final point before you start investing is to have the right mindset. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, firstly, you should always be doing your own research before you invest in anything. So if If you don't understand what you're investing in, then don't invest in it at all. It's as simple as that. And also, when it comes to mindset, you should be thinking about the long term, not the short term. You know, investing is not a get-rich-quick scheme. And also, by doing that, if there are any drops or peaks in the value of your investment in the short term, you're less likely to sell that investment based on emotions. And one tactic that I like to employ is when I invest in my investment account, I don't think of that money as my money to spend. I just think of it as money that is in another place that I can't access. And by doing that, I ride the course over the long term, and I'm less likely again to make short-term decisions based purely on emotions, which are usually the wrong ones. So guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you found the content useful and insightful and taken some bits away from it. I know it's been not the most exciting thing in the world to talk about, but I really do think that some of the things that I've covered in this video can make a huge difference to people's financial security and financial lives in general. So drop this one a like, guys, if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.